I'm Yoga Adithya, and I'm joined by my friend Satvik, where we're going to be talking about our love of cinema in general. Today, we are going to talk about film adaptations. So, my love for books actually began through watching films.
Oh, really?
I was never a reader myself, you know, and my love kind of developed into reading books. I felt books were kind of like a very dry thing that nobody would like to touch them. It's only for the nerds. But through films, I've developed a different perspective wherein I've got an exposure to a wide range of literature without even reading them. And what about you, Satvik?
Same, just like he said, when I was growing up, I used to hate going to the library
Yeah,
and just hate the very sight of it. But I always loved films, going to theaters, spending time with family in the movie theaters and
yeah,
all,
of course, who doesn't?
and watching movies on TV, on OTT and all. But I remember watching certain kind of films that were essentially film adaptations, and after watching them, my interest in literature, surged so much.
Yeah,
I
search
got
so
so
much.
much
It became.
interest in literature after that.
Hmm.
And I would start with, although I'm not a big fan of the series,
Okay.
but my cousins and my elder sister are a very big fan of the Harry Potter series.
Harry Potter series. Even I'm a fan of the Harry Potter series. Like I did not even know that Harry Potters were based off of books.
Yeah.
Maybe I think when I was 8 or 9 that I got exposure to
Hmm.
watching the Harry Potter series, and that's how I got to learn about the beautiful world that's created by J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
And also there's the Lord of the Rings trilogy,
Hmm.
which the J.R.R. Tolkien ones that have actually intrigued me a lot. In fact, my grandfather had, the series, the Lord of the Rings series in his library.
Wow.
But, I never thought that I was going to, touch those books because they're very lengthier in length.
You actually just stole those words from me, because when I was a kid, I watched Lord of the Rings on TV, and then after
Okay.
that, I essentially just loved the characters,
Yeah.
and I loved the whole universe so much that I read it. One thing that interests me so much in film adaptations
Yeah.
is that how do they make it? How do you think do they make it? Like how do they interpret it, and how do they put it in the screenplay?
Sitfield, in his book, Screenwriter's Workbook, actually talked film adaptations. Like, did you know that when they started out, Lord of the Rings is a very long book, right?
Yeah.
When Peter Jackson, the director of the Lord of the Rings, started to adapt it, you know how many pages did they write? They wrote only 30 pages of the screenplay. The screenplay was only 30 pages of single one-liners.
Wow. And they expanded after that.
Yeah, and they expanded it after that.
Yeah.
But Sitfield has actually told that adaptation is like a very intuitive process where if you read a book, you develop a personal perspective towards that book, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, you might have a different experience reading that same book, and I might have a different experience reading that particular book. Our experiences differ,
Exactly.
right? And that's what matters in screenwriting when they're adapting. Like there's many movies too, which are not actually merely just adapted out of the books, but also like they've been inspired by that. They've taken the content out of the books and just changed it according to their own taste and
Yeah,
preferences.
and one more example, because we just spoke about Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Something that Tolkien really hated,
Yeah.
Literature, was actually Frank Herbert's Dune.
Frank Herbert's Dune,
And
yeah.
in recent times, I believe that Dune is the greatest science fiction book written ever in mankind.
Yep.
And as you said that when you read a book, personal perspective matters, and especially after reading the book when you tend to adapt it, because David Lynch tried adapting Dune.
Yeah, in
and
1984, yeah.
And it like miserably failed.
But it's one of my favorite films of all time.
Really?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Lynch, and I really loved his adaptation too. But his take was different due to he wasn't given much of an artistic control. So yeah.
So one more film series, because everything is just happening randomly now.
Yeah.
So many thoughts are coming. This topic is so interesting, so much to talk about.
Yeah.
Two other pieces of pop culture I would like to recommend, and I would just like to just talk about. One is, of course, Game of Thrones, which is also based on one of the greatest
By George
series
R.
in
R.
the
Martin,
world, Song by Ice and Fire, Song of Ice and Fire. And after watching Game of Thrones, I read one of Song and Ice and Fire's recent editions, which is based on the Targaryen family, which is Fire and Blood. So, that's also an example that how film adaptations motivate the audience to essentially dive into literature. One more example I would like to give is Vishal Bharadwaj's Shakespeare trilogy in India. We didn't speak about any Indian film yet.
Yeah.
And Vishal Bharadwaj's Shakespeare trilogy is a very good example on how to adapt, Shakespearean classics into an Indian context. So movies like Maqbool and Heather, they like introduced me to Shakespeare's world. And after that, like I started reading Shakespeare, and they were like out of the world for me. Too good.
Yeah, I think even the Malayalam film Joji was an adaptation of
Joji, Macbeth.
Macbeth, yeah, Macbeth by William Shakespeare. Yeah, films like that, and also Kenneth Branagh had made a film adaptation of I think Henry V or Henry VI, which was loved by Stanley Kubrick, and that's how I got introduced to Shakespeare. So Satvik, you have asked me about how screenwriters are going to adapt films, right?
Yeah.
So I recommend you to watch a fun movie. It's called Adaptation. Have you heard about it?
No, I haven't heard about it.
Yeah, it's actually about a screenwriter who tries to adapt a very difficult book onto the screen. It's written by Charlie Kaufman. I think you might have seen Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind,
That's
right?
one of my favorite.
It's from that same screenwriter. It talks about Nick Cage. Nick Cage actually starts in as in a dual role
Nicolas Cage, yeah.
as Charlie Kaufman himself in the movie, and he tries to adapt the real life book The Orchid Thief by Susan Orlean.
Okay.
He tries to adapt it, and he faces a lot of difficulties. The kind of difficulties that a screenwriter goes through mentally is certainly explained in that movie very well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we, discussed all about film adaptations, relation between literature and cinema,
Of course.
and our favorite personal film adaptations. Is there any specific piece of literature or any piece of media that you want to see be portrayed on the big screen?
Well, there are many. So I'd like to start off with Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. Have you seen the film No Country for Old Men by the Coen brothers? It's one of the masterpieces, you know.
Yeah.
And I really want to see Blood Meridian being adapted to the big screen. I think I might have heard that Ridley Scott actually tried to put his hands on it.
Really?
On bringing it to the silver screens, but he had failed it. And it's a really, complex piece of work, and it's a really good, amazing, violent Western novel that I'd recommend everybody to read. And I hope that it gets made to the big screen someday.
Really good one, yeah. Talking about, old school Western, it's not a literature but video game, like Red Dead Redemption.
Red Dead Redemption 2.
It would be such a good movie.
Yeah. And I even think about Grand Theft Auto San Andreas and Grand Theft Auto 5 sometimes being adapted to the big screens. But games are like they already are in a sort of a visual representation, right? So I don't think movies need to be made again on them. So that's my take on that.
For me, there are two personal adaptations that I want to see being portrayed on the screen. One is already happening. It's Ramayanam. I always want to watch Ramayanam.
Nitesh Tiwari one.
But now Nitesh Tiwari and Namit Malhotra, they're making a Ramayan movie. The other one that I really want to see is a web series. It should be a web series based on the Shiva trilogy by Amish Tripathi. Like, it should be like a cool, great pan-India web series, based on that book, because it's a really deep and has so many characters. It's one of the best mythological fictions made in India. So I really want to see that being portrayed as a web series. So Yoga, we spoke about film adaptations and relationship between films and literature. But films are also made on real life stories.
Yeah.
So is there any real life biography that you like on a film?
I'd like to see a film getting made on Osho. Wild Wild Country. Yeah, Wild Wild Country. It's one of the best documentary series that I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And I wish to see a film adaptation on it, on the life of Osho.
There is one really interesting, because Wild Wild Country was on Netflix.
Yeah.
On Netflix, there's a really interesting horror show known as The House of Burari, based on the Burari.
Yeah, the Burari tragedy incident. Yeah.
Which happened in Delhi. Yeah. If anybody watches that web series, you'll just be mesmerized and blown away on how cults operate. That's how I got to know about the incident. And when I watched it, I was blown away on how these cults operate and how manipulative the leaders are. Osho was one such guy, that's what people say.
Yeah, he was a manipulator.
Yeah. I think so. That's the beauty of cinema, right? You can make adaptations on so many things.
On so many different things.
There is no limit to it.
Yeah, there's no limit to it. Must have seen One Battle After Another, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that movie was actually based off of a novel called Vineland by Thomas Pynchon.
Oh, I don't know.
And it was not fully based on Vineland. Instead, it had borrowed the main elements out of that novel, and had just changed that setting into a modern day, the modern day American setting.
Yeah.
So that was one of the fascinating things about adaptations too, because you get an idea. Literature gives you an idea, but when it gets translated into the film medium, it becomes an entirely different thing. That's the beauty of it.
It essentially becomes much more than an idea.
Yeah, much more than the idea.
This, visual representation on screen.
Yeah.
Which is, mind blowing actually.
Yeah.
And the way these screenwriters adapted, we already spoke about it, that the way these screenwriters adapt these texts on screen, that itself is an art in itself, right?
And we would like to know, what are some of your favorite books that you want to be adapted onto the big screen?
Yeah.
Please let us know.
Do tell us in the comments.